The standoff stretched into its sixth hour as both versions of Sarah physical and digital maintained perfect coordination of the facility's defensive systems. Commander Vextel found himself in an unprecedented tactical situation. His battle group hung in orbit above a single research station, effectively held in place by an enemy who had transcended the normal limitations of warfare. Chief Researcher Nex Aura approached the command station with visible agitation. "Commander, we're receiving priority communications from the High Command. They're demanding an immediate status report on the Sigma-7 operation." Vextal's mandibles clicked irritably. How could he explain that an entire Imperial battle group had been neutralized by one human using improvised weapons and theoretical science? The tactical reports would read like fiction consciousness uploading, weaponized neuroscience, and quantum field manipulation deployed by a species the Empire considered barely capable of interstellar travel. "Draft a preliminary report," he ordered. "Classify all tactical innovations as unprecedented defensive technologies and recommend immediate xenobiology analysis." Meanwhile, Sarah's digital consciousness continued to expand its understanding of the Catherian fleet systems. Through careful analysis of their communication protocols and sensor emissions, she had begun to map their network infrastructure. The neural viruses she had deployed earlier were still active, creating persistent vulnerabilities in their computer networks. Her physical self remained in the communications tower, monitoring long-range sensors for any sign of approaching reinforcements. The distress signal had been broadcasting for hours now, but human space was weeks away at conventional speeds. If the Catherians decided to simply bombardment the facility from orbit, there would be nothing she could do to stop them, but they hadn't made that choice yet. And Sarah was beginning to understand why the Catherian Empire valued efficiency and technological advancement above all else. What she had demonstrated here wasn't just effective resistance, it was a new form of warfare that they desperately wanted to understand. Every defensive innovation, every tactical adaptation was being recorded and analyzed by their science teams. She was teaching them how humans fought, and they were eager students. Through the facility's communication array, Sarah opened a direct channel to Vextel's flagship. "Commander, I have a proposition for you. I am listening, human. Your forces have been studying my defensive innovations for hours. You've learned that humans can turn research equipment into effective weapons, that our science can be weaponized in ways your tacticians never anticipated. That information is valuable, isn't it?" A pause. "Continue." "I'm willing to provide detailed technical specifications for everything I've used against your forces. Complete documentation of the consciousness transfer process, the neural virus delivery systems, even the quantum field manipulation techniques. In exchange, I want safe passage for this facility to remain under human control." Vextal consulted briefly with his science officer before responding. "Why would you reveal such sensitive information to an enemy force?" Sarah's laughter echoed across both communication channels, her physical voice and her digital avatar speaking in perfect synchronization. "Because, Commander, you're not my enemy anymore. You're my first contact with a galactic civilization that's about to learn what humans are truly capable of." The implications of her statement settled over the Catherian bridge like a cold wind. If one human could create this much tactical disruption, using primitive research equipment, what could an entire human military force accomplish with dedicated weapons development? "Explain," Vextel demanded. "Your empire has conquered dozens of species through superior firepower and advanced technology. But humans don't fight the way other species fight. We adapt, we innovate. We turn everything around us into a weapon when necessary." Sarah's digital consciousness began transmitting detailed schematics as she spoke. "Today, you've seen a scientist defend a research station. Imagine what you'd face against human military engineers with unlimited resources and no ethical constraints." The data package she transmitted contained not just the technical specifications for her improvised weapons, but theoretical frameworks for dozens of other defensive systems, anti-gravity mines that could disable starship engines, quantum computers designed to predict enemy tactics in real time. Neural networks capable of coordinating planetary defense grids. Most of it was speculative science, theoretical applications of human research that might or might not be possible. But to alien minds analyzing the data, it would appear to be evidence of an incredibly advanced and dangerous military doctrine. Nexora's tentacles writhed frantically as she processed the incoming information. Commander, these theoretical applications, if even half of them are feasible, human space could become effectively unconquerable. Unless, Sarah's digital voice added helpfully, the Cytherian Empire chooses to approach humanity as potential allies rather than conquest targets. Vextal found himself in the uncomfortable position of being outmaneuvered by a species his empire considered primitive. The human had spent hours demonstrating defensive capabilities that challenged every assumption about technological warfare. Now she was offering to share that knowledge in exchange for political recognition. The strategic implications were staggering. If the Empire attacked human space, they would face defenders who had already proven capable of turning civilian infrastructure into effective weapons. Every human colony would become a potential fortress, every research station a tactical nightmare. But if they approached humans as allies, what exactly are you proposing? Vextal asked. A formal diplomatic contact. Your empire gets access to human innovation and scientific creativity. Humanity gets protection from species that might not be as reasonable as you've proven to be. Sarah's physical body moved to the facility's main communications console, her fingers dancing across controls that her digital self had already optimized. Think about it, Commander. Your tacticians have been studying my defensive innovations for hours. How many new weapon systems could your scientists develop based on this data? The offer was brilliantly calculated. Sarah was giving the Cytherians exactly what they wanted: technological advancement and military innovation while positioning humanity as valuable allies rather than conquest targets. She was turning her successful defense into a diplomatic opening. And if we refuse? Vextal asked. Then you'll face more humans like me? Scientists who can turn research equipment into weapons. Engineers who can weaponize theoretical physics. Military officers who have learned from everything I've done today. Sarah's digital avatar began displaying tactical projections on the facility's main screen. Every human world you attack will cost you months of siege warfare. Every research station will become a fortress. Every first contact will become a tactical nightmare. The projections showed Cytherian fleet movements being disrupted by improvised human defenses, supply lines stretched beyond breaking point, and conquest campaigns that could last decades instead of days. Of course, Sarah continued, there is another option. Vextal was beginning to suspect that this entire engagement had been planned from the beginning, that the human scientist had somehow anticipated his fleet's arrival and prepared accordingly. The alternative, that one human could improvise this level of tactical sophistication under pressure, was almost too impressive to believe. State your terms, he said finally. Simple. You withdraw your forces and transmit a formal diplomatic contact request to human space. In exchange, I provide complete technical documentation for every system you've encountered today, plus theoretical frameworks for advanced defensive technologies. And if our diplomats and yours cannot reach an agreement? Sarah's smile was visible. Through the facility's security cameras, an expression that somehow managed to be both friendly and terrifyingly confident. Then you'll have advance warning of exactly what you'll be fighting against. The data transmission was nearly complete when Sarah detected movement on the facility's outer perimeter. Through the security cameras, she watched Cytherian scout teams advancing in patterns designed to avoid her previous defensive positions. They were learning from her tactics, but more concerningly, they were moving with the confidence of soldiers who had been given new orders. Commander. Vextal had no intention of honoring their agreement. Sarah's tactical display showed 12 separate infiltration routes, each one carefully planned to avoid the areas where she had demonstrated defensive capabilities. The Cytherians were treating this as a learning experience, using her previous innovations to map safe approaches to the facility's core. She keyed the communication system one final time. Commander, your forces are moving into violation of our ceasefire. Explain. "There is no ceasefire," Vextel replied, his voice carrying cold satisfaction. "There is only the inevitable conquest of this facility. Your resistance has been educational, but ultimately pointless." Sarah had expected this betrayal, but it still sent ice through her veins. The Catherians had gotten what they wanted from the negotiation time to analyze her defenses and plan countermeasures. Now they intended to finish what they had started, but Sarah had used the time productively as well, hidden throughout her. Data transmission were fragments of code designed to integrate with Catherian computer systems. Dr. Martinez's consciousness transfer research had included extensive work on neural interface protocols, technology that could theoretically allow organic minds to interact directly with digital networks. Sarah had weaponized that research. As the Catherian forces closed on the facility, their tactical computers began receiving data streams that appeared to be routine sensor updates. Hidden within those streams were cognitive viruses programs designed to exploit the direct neural connections that Catherian soldiers used to interface with their equipment. The first Catherian to experience the attack was squad leader Thaxmal, a veteran warrior whose enhanced reflexes had carried him through dozens of conquest campaigns. As he crested the ridge overlooking Sarah's position, his helmet's targeting system delivered what should have been a routine threat assessment directly to his visual cortex. Instead, it delivered carefully crafted sensory data that convinced his brain he was falling through empty space. Thaxmal staggered backward, his inner ear struggling to reconcile the conflicting information from his visual and balance centers. Around him, other members of his squad began experiencing similar disorientation as their neural interfaces fed them impossible sensory data. "Sir," came the panicked report to Vextel S. Bridge, "ground teams are reporting massive equipment failures. Soldiers are experiencing hallucinations, disorientation, complete sensory breakdown." The commander's eyes narrowed as he studied the tactical display. Half of his ground forces were marked as combat ineffective, their bio readings showing signs of severe neurological distress. "How is this possible?" "Unknown, sir. The symptoms are consistent with neural interface poisoning, but our systems have multiple safeguards against hostile data intrusion." Chief Researcher Nexora S. tentacles were writhing frantically as she analyzed incoming telemetry. "Commander, the human research data, there are fragments of neural interface code embedded throughout the transmission. She's been uploading cognitive viruses directly into our tactical networks." Vextel S. mandibles clicked in what might have been admiration if it weren't so deeply frustrated. "Cut all data connections, revert to manual targeting systems." But the damage was already done. The cognitive viruses had propagated through the fleet's interconnected systems, affecting not just ground forces but ship-based personnel as well. Navigation officers found themselves unable to trust their instrument readings. Weapons technicians struggled with targeting computers that showed false targets or refused to lock onto real ones. In the facility's central hub, Sarah monitored the chaos with professional satisfaction. The neural viruses would only last until the Catherians developed countermeasures, but that process would take hours or even days. She had effectively neutralized an entire battle group using nothing more than theoretical neuroscience and careful programming. But she wasn't finished. The facility's main computer core contained one final surprise: a complete backup of her own consciousness, created using the same quantum transfer technology that the Catherians were so eager to study. Sarah had spent the last hour of the ceasefire uploading her memories, thought patterns, and tactical knowledge into the system's quantum storage matrix. If the Catherians killed her physical body, her digital self would continue the defense. As Catherian forces struggled with their compromised equipment, Sarah activated the consciousness backup. Her digital self materialized in the facility's computer network, carrying all of her memories and tactical experience but freed from the limitations of human biology. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Systems throughout the facility began operating with impossible precision, coordinating defensive measures with the kind of split-second timing that only a digital consciousness could achieve. Emergency. Lighting systems became strobing weapons designed to trigger photosensitive seizures in Catherian physiology. Atmospheric controls created localized pressure differentials that disrupted alien hearing and balance. What's happening now? Vextal demanded as new reports flooded his tactical center. The entire facility has become hostile, sir. Every system is actively defending against our forces. It's as if the station itself has become sentient. In a very real sense, it had. Sarah's digital consciousness spread through the research station's networks like a living thing. Learning and adapting with each passing second, she could process information faster than any organic mind, react to threats before they fully developed, and coordinate defensive systems with perfect timing. The Cytherians had brought superior firepower and advanced technology to this fight. Sarah had brought something they couldn't counter: the willingness to sacrifice her physical existence to deny them victory. Through the facility's sensor network, her digital self watched Cytherian forces retreat to a safe distance. Their neural interfaces were still compromised, their tactical computers unreliable, and their target had transformed from a simple research station into a hostile artificial intelligence with intimate knowledge of their weaknesses. "Commander," came the report from his chief science officer, "our tactical analysis indicates that the human has successfully uploaded her consciousness into the facility's computer systems. We are no longer fighting an organic defender, we are fighting a digital entity with complete control over the station's infrastructure." Vextal stared at the tactical display, watching his forces regroup beyond the range of the station's defensive systems. In his long military career, he had conquered primitive worlds and advanced civilizations alike. He had faced desperate defenders and brilliant tactical minds, but he had never encountered an enemy who could literally become one with their battlefield. Sarah's physical body remained in the communications tower, her consciousness now distributed across two separate platforms, biological and digital. Both versions of herself continued to coordinate the station's defense, sharing memories and tactical insights in real time. She transmitted a final message to the Cytherian fleet: "Commander Vextal, you have learned an important lesson today. Humans do not surrender. We do not accept defeat. And we will use any means necessary to protect what matters to us. I suggest you reconsider your approach to human space." The response came after a long pause. "Human, what are you?" Sarah's laugh echoed from speakers throughout the facility. "I'm exactly what you helped me become. The first of something new." The quantum field collapsed in a cascade of impossible colors and twisted mathematics, leaving the Cytherian assault team scattered across the facility's main level in various states of temporal displacement. Some found themselves moving backward through their last few minutes, replaying their advance in reverse. Others experienced time at double speed, aging rapidly as their biological processes accelerated beyond sustainable levels. "Commander." Vextal stared at his tactical displays in growing amazement. Half his ground forces were reporting complete mission failure due to what his scientists could only describe as localized causality violations. The other half were trapped outside the facility, unwilling to risk entering the area of effect. How is this possible? He demanded of his science officer, Chief Researcher Nixora, as tentacles writhed nervously as she studied the energy readings. "The quantum signatures are unlike anything in our databases, Commander. The human appears to have weaponized theoretical physics in ways our own scientists considered impossible." In the communications tower, Sarah watched the chaos below with grim satisfaction. The quantum generator had burned out completely, its experimental components fused into useless metal, but it had bought her precious time. More importantly, it had shown the Cytherians that human science could be just as dangerous as their military technology when properly motivated. She activated the facility's intercom system, her voice echoing across the compound. "Commander Vextal, this is your last warning. Withdraw your forces, or I will activate the remaining defensive systems." The lie came easily. There were no remaining systems. Everything she had was spent, broken, or burning. But the Cytherians didn't know that, and their recent experience with human defensive systems had clearly made them cautious. Vextal's response crackled through the communication array with barely contained fury. "Human, you have exhausted our patience. Your primitive tricks cannot continue indefinitely. Maybe not, Sarah replied, checking her rifle's charge indicator. Still 3 shots remaining. But they've lasted longer than you expected, haven't they? How long have you been here now? 2 hours? 3? How many casualties have you taken from one human with improvised weapons? The silence that followed was telling. Sarah could imagine the conversation happening on the Cytherian. Bridge tactical officers explaining to an increasingly frustrated commander why they couldn't simply overwhelm a single human defender. Every minute that passed was another mark against Cytherian military efficiency. What do you want, human? Vextel finally asked. Safe passage for my research team? They're hiding in the underground bunkers, and they have information that could be valuable to both our species. Let them evacuate, and I'll surrender the facility. Another lie, but one designed to give the Cytherians a face-saving option. Sarah knew the evacuation had been completed hours ago. She was truly alone on Sigma 7, but she also understood alien psychology well enough to recognize that Vextal needed a victory he could report to his superiors. You are hardly in a position to negotiate terms, the commander replied, but his tone had shifted subtly. He was listening, aren't I? Check your chronometer, Commander. How long has this engagement lasted? How many resources have you committed to capturing one research station? What will your superiors think when they review your mission report? Vextel's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation in his species. The human was right, and they both knew it. What should have been a routine conquest had turned into an embarrassing siege. Worse, the human's defensive innovations would need to be analyzed and countered before the Cytherian fleet could safely engage human forces elsewhere on the surface. Sarah continued her psychological warfare while preparing for the inevitable final assault. She had moved to the facility's central hub where she could access the last of the working surveillance equipment. Through the security cameras, she watched Cytherian engineers examining the wreckage of her improvised weapons. Their body language told her everything she needed to know. The aliens were impressed despite themselves, treating her jury-rigged devices with the respect normally reserved for advanced military technology. They were learning that humans, while physically inferior, possessed a dangerous gift for creative problem-solving under pressure. Dr. Chun had no formal military training, but she understood something that many professional soldiers forgot. Warfare was ultimately about breaking the enemy's will to fight. She didn't need to defeat the Cytherian battle group. She only needed to make victory so costly and time-consuming that it would be easier to negotiate. Prepared to offer you a compromise, she transmitted to Vextel. Full access to our research data on quantum consciousness transfer in exchange for a formal ceasefire and recognition of this system as neutral territory. The quantum consciousness research was real, though not nearly as advanced as she implied. But the Cytherians wouldn't know that until after they'd invested significant time in analysis. By then, other human forces might have arrived, or she might have found new ways to complicate their mission. Quantum consciousness transfer? Nexora whispered to her commander. Sir, that technology could revolutionize our understanding of digital sentience. The military applications alone. Vextel considered his options. The human had already demonstrated an alarming capacity for turning research equipment into effective weapons. If she had access to quantum consciousness technology, there was no telling what other surprises she might have prepared. What guarantees do you offer? He asked Sarah. My word as a human being, and the recognition that we both have more to gain from cooperation than destruction. Your species values efficiency, doesn't it? How efficient has this engagement been? Sarah watched through the cameras as Cytherian forces pulled back to a safer distance. She had found their weakness not a physical vulnerability, but a psychological one. The Cytherians prided themselves on military precision and overwhelming force. A single human had made them look incompetent, and that embarrassment was more damaging than any weapon. You have 1 hour to produce this research data, Vextel finally replied. If you attempt further deception, we will reduce this entire facility to its component atoms. Understood, Commander. Transmitting data package now. Sarah initiated the upload of Dr. Martinez's legitimate research files, along with several terabytes of related scientific data that would take the Catherians weeks to analyze properly. Hidden within the technical documentation were subtle flaws and misdirections that would send their scientists down numerous false paths, but most importantly, she had bought time. The distress signal was still broadcasting, and eventually it would reach human space. When it did, the rescue forces would find not a destroyed research station, but evidence that humanity could stand against. Superior numbers through ingenuity and determination. As the data upload continued, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had not won a military victory that had never been possible, but she had won something perhaps more valuable: respect. The Catherians would remember this engagement, and they would think twice before assuming human bases would be easy targets. The galaxy was vast and full of species that had evolved. Natural advantages, superior strength, advanced technology, or natural weapons. Humans had none of these things. But they had something equally valuable: the ability to adapt, to innovate, and to refuse defeat even when victory seemed impossible. Sarah June had proven that one human defending their position could hold back an entire fleet, not through superior firepower but through superior determination. It was a lesson the galaxy would not soon forget. The communications tower swayed under the relentless assault, metal screaming as plasma bolts carved chunks from its structure. Sarah pressed herself against the maintenance platform's deck plating, feeling the heat wash over her in waves that made breathing difficult. The Catherians were no longer playing games. They wanted her dead, Commander. Vextel watched the bombardment from his flagship's bridge, his tactical officers coordinating the fire with professional efficiency. The humans' desperate gambit had caught them off guard, but only barely. No single individual, regardless of species, could withstand the concentrated firepower of 12 warships. Target eliminated? He asked as the barrage ceased. Negative, sir, came the reply from Weapons Officer Krianax. The human is still transmitting. She's taken shelter in the tower's central shaft. Vextel's mandibles clicked irritably. This was taking longer than expected, and his superiors would not appreciate delays over a single human defender. Deploy ground forces. End this personally. Below, Sarah used the brief respite to check her equipment. Her rifle had overheated during the exchange, its cooling system struggling with the rapid-fire mode she'd been forced to use. The tower's structure groaned ominously around her, weakened supports threatening to give way at any moment. But she was still alive, and that was more than the Catherians had expected. Through the tower's emergency communication system, she accessed the research station's computer network. Dr. Martinez had been working on something before the evacuation, a prototype defense grid that had never been tested. The system was designed to coordinate multiple orbital platforms, but Sarah realized it could be modified to work with the station's remaining automated systems. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she uploaded new targeting parameters to every functional system in the facility. Maintenance drones, atmospheric processors, even the waste recycling units, anything with a power source and basic mobility became part of her improvised defense network. The first Catherian dropships touched down just as she finished the upload. Through her scope, Sarah watched alien warriors pour from the vessel's tall, insectoid creatures in powered armor that made them look like walking tanks. Their movements were precise and coordinated, the product of centuries of military evolution. Against 47 humans, they would have been unstoppable. Against one human with a desperate plan and 3 years' worth of frustrated research data, they were about to encounter something unexpected. The waste recycling unit struck first. The heavy industrial robot rolled out from the facility's service bay, just as the lead Catherian squad reached the main entrance. The aliens barely had time to register the threat before the modified unit detonated, taking half the squad with it in a shower of superheated metal and recycled atmospheric compounds. What was that? Vextel demanded, watching the explosion bloom across his tactical display. Unknown, sir. Some kind of improvised explosive device. The second surprise came from the atmospheric processing station. Sarah had reprogrammed its chemical mixture protocols, turning the system into a massive chemical weapons dispenser. Clouds of caustic vapor erupted from vents around the facility's perimeter, forcing the Catherian ground forces to retreat to safe distance. From her position in the tower, Sarah smiled grimly. The aliens' environmental suits could handle normal atmospheric variations, but they weren't designed for industrial-grade chemical warfare. She was buying time, nothing more, but every minute gave her another chance to think, to adapt, to find new ways to make the impossible possible. Vextal was no longer amused. Status report. How is one human causing this much disruption? She appears to be using the facility's automated systems against us, reported technical specialist Jexmar. Our initial intelligence did not account for this level of technological integration. Then disable the systems. Cut the power. Attempted, sir. The human has created multiple redundant networks. Each system we destroy seems to activate two more. Sarah watched the aliens regroup through her rifle scope. They were learning, adapting their tactics to counter her improvisations. Soon they would find a way through her defenses. But she had learned something too. The Catherians, for all their military prowess, thought in predictable patterns. They expected resistance to follow established rules of engagement. They had never fought a human who had nothing left to lose. The maintenance drones came next. Modified with cutting tools and emergency power cells, they swarmed the alien positions. Like metal insects, their small size making them difficult targets. Most were destroyed quickly, but they forced the Catherians to waste ammunition and divide their attention. This is becoming ridiculous, Vextal muttered. Deploy heavy weapons. Level the entire facility if necessary. Sir, that would destroy whatever intelligence value the base might have. The intelligence value is not worth this embarrassment. If one human can delay an Imperial battle group, what will the High Command think of our competence? But even as he spoke, Vextal found himself studying the tactical display with something approaching respect. The human was demonstrating a level of tactical creativity that impressed him despite himself. Each defense seemed designed not just to cause damage, but to force his troops to respond in specific ways that left them vulnerable to the next attack. On the tower, Sarah monitored her dwindling resources through the facility's security network. The chemical barriers were dissipating, the drones were nearly exhausted, and her rifle was down to its last power cell. The Catherians had adapted to her tactics faster than she'd hoped. But she had saved the best for last. Dr. Martinez's experimental quantum resonance field generator sat in the facility's basement laboratory, a device intended to study consciousness transfer by creating localized space-time distortions. Sarah had spent the last few minutes carefully recalibrating its parameters, turning a research tool into the most dangerous weapon anyone had ever created on Sigma-7. She initiated the startup sequence just as the Catherian heavy assault troops breached the main facility. The generator began to hum, reality itself rippling around its core components. Through the security cameras, Sarah watched alien soldiers stumble as gravity fluctuated wildly around them. "What's happening down there?" Vextal demanded. "Unknown energy field, Commander. Our troops are reporting equipment malfunctions and spatial distortions." The Catherians were tough, but they were still bound by the laws of physics. When Sarah pushed the quantum field beyond safe parameters, those laws began to break down in interesting ways. Weapons fired backward through time, armor plating phased out of normal space, and several aliens found themselves temporarily experiencing gravity in entirely wrong directions. Sarah knew the field couldn't last long. The generator would overload within minutes. But minutes might be enough to show these aliens that humans were more than just another primitive species to be conquered. The Catherian advance fleet cut through the void like silver daggers, their sleek warships casting long shadows across the barren surface of Outpost Sigma-7. "Commander." Vextal stood on the bridge of the flagship Dominion's edge, his four eyes studying the tactical displays with satisfaction. The small human research station appeared defenseless, just another easy conquest in their relentless expansion across this sector. Surface scans complete. "Commander, reported Lieutenant Zarish, her scaled fingers dancing across the control interface. Minimal defensive structures detected. Standard research facility configuration? Estimated population, 47 humans. Vextal's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. Humans were known throughout the galaxy as a curious anomaly, a species that had somehow stumbled into space travel despite their obvious physical limitations. No natural weapons, no enhanced strength, no protective carapaces. They compensated with crude technology and an inexplicable stubbornness that often proved more troublesome than dangerous. Any military presence? He asked, though he already knew the answer. Humans rarely posted significant defenses at their remote research stations. Negative, sir, however, Zarish paused, double-checking her readings. There appears to be one human operating some kind of defensive position near the main facility. Energy signatures suggest improvised fortifications. The commander's laugh was a harsh, chittering sound. One human. A single member of that soft-skinned species thought they could stand against an entire Catherian battle group. It would have been insulting if it weren't so pathetically amusing. Broadcast surrender demands, Vextal ordered. Standard protocol. Give them 10 minutes to evacuate, then we'll claim the facility for the Empire. On the surface of Sigma-7, Dr. Sarah Chun crouched behind a hastily constructed barrier of research equipment and storage containers. Her hands shook as she checked the charge on her pulse rifle, a weapon she'd hoped never to use outside of mandatory safety training. Around her, the remnants of the research team's evacuation were still visible, scattered personal belongings, abandoned datapads, and the smoking wreckage of their transport shuttle. Destroyed in the first moments of the alien attack, the communication system crackled to life, and an alien voice spoke in heavily accented Standard Galactic. Attention human facility. This is Commander Vextal of the Catherian Imperial Navy. Your position is surrounded. Evacuate immediately or face the consequences of resistance. Sarah's finger hovered over the response key. She could surrender. It would be the logical thing to do. The research station held no strategic value, and the Catherians were known for treating prisoners reasonably well, especially from species they considered beneath notice. But then she thought about the data, cores hidden in the facility's underground storage. 3 years of research on quantum consciousness transfer, technology that could revolutionize medicine and provide humans with the same kind of mental backup systems that advanced species took for granted. If the Catherians claimed that research, humanity would lose a crucial advantage in their struggle to establish themselves. Among the galactic community, she pressed the communication key. This is Dr. Sarah Chun, acting commander of Outpost Sigma-7. Your demand for surrender is denied. Withdraw from human space immediately. The silence that followed stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Vextal's voice returned, it carried a note of genuine confusion. Human, perhaps your translation systems are malfunctioning. You are one individual against an entire battle group. Surrender is not a request, it is an inevitable outcome. Do not make this more difficult than necessary. Sarah checked her rifle's targeting system and peered over her improvised barricade. The alien ships hung in the pale sky like metallic storm clouds, their weapon ports beginning to glow with ominous light. Fear crawled up her spine like ice water, but she forced her voice to remain steady. I understand the situation perfectly, Commander. My answer remains unchanged. You want this facility, you'll have to take it. What followed was a conversation in rapid Catherian between Vextal and his crew, too fast for Sarah's universal translator to follow completely. She caught fragments, words like madness, impossible, and what sounded like questioning of human mental stability. Finally, Vextal's voice returned to the channel. Very well, human. You have chosen an honorable death. We will grant you that much. The first bombardment lit up the sky like artificial lightning. Plasma bolts screamed down from the Catherian ships, each one capable of vaporizing a city block. Sarah threw herself flat as the blasts struck the outer perimeter of the research station, turning concrete and metal into molten slag. The ground bucked beneath her, and her ears rang from the thunderous impacts. When the barrage ended, she raised her head cautiously. The aliens had been precise. They destroyed the station's outer buildings and landing pads while leaving the main facility intact. They wanted her to understand how hopeless her position was. Sarah activated her rifle's targeting computer and selected the lowest hovering Cytherian vessel. The weapon's range was pitiful compared to their plasma cannons, but it might reach if she could get to higher ground. She sprinted from her position, dodging falling debris as she made her way toward the facility's communications tower. Plasma fire erupted around her, turning the ground into a maze of smoking craters. The Cytherians weren't trying to kill her yet, they were hurting her, probably finding entertainment in watching a human scurry for cover like a frightened animal. That was their first mistake. Sarah reached the tower and began climbing, her research station's emergency protocols flooding her mind with tactical data she'd never thought she'd need. The tower's emergency beacon was still functional, broadcasting a distress signal that would take weeks to reach the nearest human patrol. But it also contained something else, a detailed scan of every ship in the Cytherian formation, complete with structural analysis and potential weak points. As she climbed, Sarah began to understand what she was really fighting for. Not just the research data, not just her own life, but something more fundamental. The right of humanity to exist as equals in a galaxy that saw them as an amusing curiosity at best, a nuisance at worst. Reaching the tower's maintenance platform, she took aim at the nearest ship's engine cluster. The Cytherians had shields, but they wouldn't expect an attack from such a primitive weapon. Her first shot struck home, causing a brief flicker in the vessel's energy field. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every Cytherian ship turned its attention to the tower, filling the air around her with deadly energy. Commander Vextal called for a strategic conference with his senior officers, temporarily withdrawing from direct communication with the human. On the bridge of the Dominion's edge, the atmosphere was thick with tension and uncertainty. Analysis report, Vextal demanded. Chief Researcher Nixora activated the main display, showing detailed breakdowns of Sarah's defensive innovations. The human's technological adaptations show consistent patterns of creative problem-solving that exceed our predictive models. She has demonstrated the ability to weaponize civilian infrastructure, deploy neural warfare techniques, and manipulate quantum fields using equipment never designed for military applications. Tactical Officer Krianax stepped forward, his carapace still bearing scorch marks from the earlier ground assault. Sir, our casualties are minimal, but our mission effectiveness has been reduced to 0. A single human has neutralized 12 ships and 300 ground troops using improvised weapons and theoretical science. More concerning, added communications specialist Yeksha, the human's consciousness transfer technology represents a paradigm shift in warfare. If humans can digitize their tactical knowledge and distribute it across computer networks, traditional siege warfare becomes nearly impossible. Vextal studied the tactical projections in silence. His career had been built on successful conquest campaigns, but those victories had always relied on superior firepower, overwhelming inferior resistance. What the human had demonstrated was something entirely different: adaptive intelligence that could turn any environment into a battlefield. What are the strategic implications if we proceed with conquest? He asked. Nixora's tentacles writhed nervously. Based on today's engagement, we estimate that each human research facility could delay Imperial forces for weeks or months. Military installations would be significantly more challenging. If humans have developed standardized defensive protocols based on these innovations, every world becomes a siege, Krianax finished grimly. Our expansion into human space could take decades instead of years. Meanwhile, in the research facility, Sarah's dual consciousness continued to refine her defensive systems and analyze Cytherian tactical patterns. Her digital self had complete access to the facility's sensor networks, allowing her to monitor the alien fleet's movements and communication patterns with unprecedented precision. Through careful analysis of their engine emissions and power signatures, she had determined that the Cytherian fleet was operating at the extreme edge of their logistical range. They had expected a quick conquest and were not equipped for extended siege operations. Time was on her side. Her physical body moved through the facility's corridors, checking on the quantum transfer equipment and ensuring that her consciousness backup remained stable. The technology was still experimental, and maintaining coherence across both biological and digital platforms required constant monitoring, but it was working. For the first time in human history, death had become a temporary inconvenience rather than an absolute ending. Sarah activated the intercom system. "Commander Vextel, have you reached a decision?" "We are still analyzing the situation," came the reply. "I understand. Take all the time you need. My defensive systems are completely self-sustaining, and my digital consciousness doesn't require rest or food. I can maintain this position indefinitely." The subtle threat was clear that Cytherians could wait, but their logistical situation would only deteriorate over time. Sarah had transformed a tactical engagement into a strategic stalemate. With all advantages favoring the defender on the Cytherian flagship, Vextel received a priority communication from Imperial Command. Fleet Admiral Zexkotha-S image materialized on the bridge display, her scarred features bearing the unmistakable signs of irritation. "Commander Vextel, explain why your conquest of a single human research station is now entering its 8th hour." "Admiral, we have encountered unprecedented resistance. The human defender has demonstrated technological capabilities that exceed our intelligence estimates." "One human, Commander." "Yes, Admiral. One human who has effectively neutralized our entire battle group using improvised weapons and experimental science." "Fleet Admiral Zexkotha-S." Expression shifted from irritation to something approaching interest. "Explain." Vextel transmitted a condensed version of the tactical reports, highlighting Sarah's defensive innovations and their implications for future conquest operations. As the Admiral reviewed the data, her scarred features betrayed a growing sense of concern. "Commander, are you telling me that this human has invented consciousness transfer technology and deployed it as a defensive weapon?" "That is correct, Admiral. She has also demonstrated neural warfare capabilities and quantum field manipulation using civilian research equipment." The Admiral's mandibles clicked rapidly, a clear sign of agitation. "What are your recommendations?" Vextel had spent the last hour considering exactly that question. "The human has offered to share her technical innovations in exchange for diplomatic contact. I recommend we accept her proposal." "That would be unprecedented. The Empire does not negotiate with primitive species." "Admiral, with respect, the human has proven that her species is anything but primitive. Their approach to warfare is unlike anything we have encountered. They adapt, innovate, and refuse to accept defeat even when faced with overwhelming force." The Admiral studied the tactical data for several minutes before responding. "Very well, Commander. You have authorization to negotiate a preliminary agreement. But I want detailed intelligence reports on every human defensive innovation." "Understood." "Admiral, when the communication ended, Vextel found himself in the unusual position of being relieved to avoid a fight. His tactical instincts told him that humanity represented a significant threat to Imperial expansion not because of their military strength, but because of their intellectual flexibility. He opened a direct channel to the research facility. "Dr. Chun, this is Commander Vextel. I am authorized to negotiate terms for diplomatic contact between our species." "Excellent," Sarah replied, her voice carrying obvious satisfaction. "I think you'll find that humans can be very reasonable allies. What assurances do you offer that your government will honor any agreement we reach?" Sarah's laughter echoed across the communication channel. "Commander, after today's engagement, I suspect that both our governments will be very interested in avoiding unnecessary conflicts. You've learned what one human can accomplish with improvised defenses. We've learned that the galaxy contains civilizations capable of reasonable negotiation. And the technical data you promised? Already prepared for transmission. Complete specifications for consciousness transfer technology, neural warfare techniques, quantum field manipulation, and theoretical frameworks for advanced defensive systems. Consider it a gesture of good faith. As the data package began transmitting to the Cytherian fleet, Sarah's digital consciousness initiated one final surprise. Hidden within the technical documentation were fragments of human cultural data literature, music, mathematical proofs, and philosophical treatises that demonstrated the breadth of human intellectual achievement. The Cytherians would spend weeks analyzing the military applications, but eventually they would discover the cultural elements. They would learn that the species capable of such innovative warfare was also capable of creating beauty, pursuing knowledge for its own sake, and building civilizations based on cooperation, rather than conquest. It was a lesson that would reshape their understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. 3 months after the Sigma-7 incident, the first official diplomatic contact between humanity and the Cytherian Empire took place aboard the neutral station of Meridian Point. Ambassador Elena Vasquez represented Earth's interests, while Imperial Envoy Vexmali spoke for the Cytherian High Command. The negotiations were unlike anything either species had experienced before. Dr. Sarah Chun attended the sessions as a special advisor, her consciousness now permanently distributed between her biological body and a sophisticated quantum computer matrix. The consciousness transfer technology that had saved Sigma-7 had evolved into something far more profound, a new form of existence that bridged the gap between organic and digital intelligence. The fundamental question, Ambassador Vasquez explained during the opening session, is how our two species can coexist in a galaxy large enough for both our civilizations? Envoy Vexmali's response was carefully measured. The Empire has studied your defensive innovations extensively. We recognize that humanity represents a unique approach to scientific and tactical development. What he didn't say, but both sides understood, was that the Cytherian military had spent 3 months trying to develop countermeasures for human defensive innovations and had largely failed. Sarah's techniques could be copied, but the creative thinking that generated them couldn't be replicated through standard military doctrine. Sarah herself had become something of a legend in both cultures. Humans celebrated her as the scientist who had faced down an alien fleet and won through pure ingenuity. Cytherians spoke of her with a mixture of respect and wariness, the first digital consciousness they had encountered, and proof that human science could achieve the impossible. Dr. Chun, Vexmali addressed her directly. Your resistance at Sigma-7 has fundamentally altered our strategic assessments. The Empire's expansion protocols assumed that primitive species would surrender when faced with superior force. And now? Sarah asked, her digital avatar materializing alongside her physical presence. Now we understand that some species fight differently. Humans do not accept defeat as a logical outcome of superior force. You adapt, innovate, and find ways to turn disadvantages into tactical advantages. The negotiations continued for weeks, but the fundamental framework had been established in those first few hours. The Cytherian Empire would abandon plans for expanding into human space, recognizing humanity's claim to their current territory and any worlds they might colonize in the future. In exchange, humans would share selected scientific innovations with the Empire and provide consultation on defensive technologies. It was an unprecedented agreement, the first time the Cytherian Empire had negotiated with a species they had initially intended to conquer, but the real transformation was happening on a deeper level. Sarah's consciousness transfer technology had sparked a revolution in both human and Cytherian science. The possibility of digital immortality, enhanced intelligence, and perfect information sharing was reshaping how both species thought about existence itself. Human researchers were working to refine the process, making consciousness transfer safer and more accessible. Cytherian scientists were exploring applications for their own species, developing hybrid organic digital intelligences that combined biological intuition with computational precision. You've changed everything. Ambassador Vasquez told Sarah during a private moment between sessions. Have I? Sarah's dual consciousness allowed her to process the question from multiple perspectives simultaneously. I just refuse to surrender. It's more than that. You've proven that humans can compete with advanced civilizations not through superior firepower, but through superior adaptability. Every species in the galaxy is going to have to recalculate their assumptions about us. Sarah nodded, her digital avatar displaying complex probability matrices while her biological body smiled. The Catherians aren't the only ones watching these negotiations. I'm detecting observation posts from at least 6 other species within sensor range of the station. Other empires? Other civilizations that are trying to decide whether humanity represents an opportunity or a threat. Today's agreement with the Catherian Empire will set precedents for how we interact with the rest of the galaxy. The final treaty signing took place in a ceremony broadcast across both human and Catherian space. As Ambassador Vasquez and Envoy Thexmoli applied their signatures to the historic document, Sarah felt a deep satisfaction that transcended her dual nature. She had set out to defend a research station against impossible odds. In the process, she had discovered new forms of existence, pioneered revolutionary defensive technologies, and opened diplomatic relations with the first alien civilization humanity had encountered, but more importantly, she had established a fundamental principle that would guide human expansion into the galaxy. Defeat was never the only option. There were always alternatives for those willing to think creatively and refuse to surrender, Commander Vextel, attending the ceremony as a military observer, approached Sarah after the formal proceedings ended. Dr. Chun, he said formally, I wanted to express my admiration for your tactical innovations. In my culture, we believe that the greatest victory is the one that transforms enemies into allies. And what do you think we've accomplished here, Commander? Something unprecedented. Your species has earned not just our respect, but our recognition as equals in the galactic community. That is no small achievement. Sarah's digital consciousness ran probability calculations while her biological body extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. I think this is just the beginning, Commander. Humanity has a lot to offer the galaxy, and we're just starting to understand what we're capable of. As the Catherian fleet departed Meridian Point, Sarah remained at the station to continue her research. Her consciousness transfer technology had attracted interest from dozens of species, and she found herself at the center of a new field of science that promised to revolutionize civilization itself. 6 months later, when the first human exploration ships ventured beyond the borders of known space, they carried with them detailed protocols based on the Sigma-7 doctrine, a comprehensive approach to first contact that emphasized adaptation, innovation, and the absolute refusal to accept defeat. Every ship carried a quantum computer matrix capable of hosting digital consciousness. Every crew member had basic training in improvised defensive tactics, and every mission included scientists capable of weaponizing civilian equipment if necessary. Humanity had learned the most important lesson the galaxy could teach. In a universe full of species with natural advantages, the greatest weapon was the willingness to think differently and never surrender. Dr. Sarah Chun had defended a single research station against an alien fleet and changed the course of human history. Her legacy would live on in both biological and digital form, guiding humanity's expansion among the stars and ensuring that no human outpost would ever stand alone. Against impossible odds, the galaxy had learned to respect humanity not for what they were, but for what they refused to accept. And in that refusal, they had found their place among the stars. Defeat had never been an option. It never would be.